Hey there drone fans, Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip I'll be reviewing 5 important settings for the Mavic Mini that every pilot should know about. The Mavic Mini was built to be an incredibly easy quad to fly. You can pretty much buy this quad, pop it out of the box, charge up the batteries, put it up in the air, and have a whole lot of fun flying without adjusting anything. But there are a couple of settings inside the DJI Fly application that can really improve your flight experience with just a little bit of tweaking. We've also had a lot of questions over the last 2 weeks about these 5 particular settings from viewers, so I thought, okay, it's time for a clip. Let me sit down, explain what the settings are, how they impact the flight of the quad, and give you the numbers that I use when I'm out flying my Mavic Mini. Now the first 3 I'm going to talk about affect the way the gimbal moves, and that's really important if you're recording any video from the air because as humans, we're looking for natural movement in any video footage we're watching, and if we see things like jerky movements or fast movements, that's not something you're going to do naturally unless you're the Terminator. You're pretty much going to turn your head slowly, looking up and looking down, so the camera needs to do the same thing. Now I'm not saying you can't get great video right out of the box with it, but making a couple of adjustments to both the pitch speed and the pitch smoothness can really improve your video recording, and it's not going to make you Francis Ford Coppola, in a day, but you'll probably get halfway to a Coppola if you make these adjustments. So I'll talk about those 2. The third one has to do with the upward gimbal rotation, and I'm not sure why that's not turned on as a default, but normally you can view the horizon down 90 degrees directly at the ground. By turning on that setting, you can actually look 20 degrees above the horizon, and it just gives you a lot more movement, if you will, to be able to record more cool stuff. So those are the first 3, and I'll get into those in a minute. The fourth one has to do with video caching. I've had a lot of questions about video caching. What is it? Do I need it? Should I turn it on? Why would I turn it on? So I'll explain what it is, and I'll give you some settings on what I think are appropriate for video caching. I think it's a great feature, and I use it a lot. The 5th one, which is probably the most important setting of all, and I probably should cover this first, is the return to home height default. Now the default return to home height determines when you push the return to home button or when something terrible happens with the drone where it's got to get back and land where it took off. That's the setting that determines how high it elevates before it makes its way back home. So think about this a second. If you don't check that and it's set to 60 feet and you're out in the field with 100-foot trees, do the math. It's not making it home. It's going to introduce itself to a pine tree out in the field someplace. So it's really important that you set that at an appropriate height for the area you're flying. And the thing to remember is that even if you set these to what you think is right, if you do a firmware update, if something wacky happens with the quad, they can all get reset. So it's really important every now and then. That's something you should check on a regular basis when you're out flying, because hitting that return to home button and expecting it to elevate over the trees and then hearing a pop and it's not showing up over the trees is a really bad situation to be in. So anyway, that's the 5th one. So the first 3 I'm going to talk about are the gimbal movements. And I'd mentioned before, pitch speed, pitch smoothness are the first 2. Now pitch is the way the gimbal moves up and down. And you guys know when you're flying this, you've got a thumb wheel on the back here. And as you move the thumb wheel, the gimbal's going to respond to that. And it's really difficult because it's a digital thumb wheel and we're analog creatures. It's really difficult for you to, even if you're good at this, to move it slow enough to get that consistent pitch up and down. So by changing the speed, how fast it moves up and down, you can really smooth out that movement. So the adjustment I like there is somewhere not 0 and not all the way at the top. I like it somewhere around 10. Now, lower is slower. That's how I remember it. So if you go to 0, it's going to be impossibly slow. It's like molasses in the winter going down like this. It's way too slow for you to make those cinematic shots. Going to 10 or 15 gives you a really nice buttery smooth movement. It's right about the right speed as you maybe move your head up or move your head down like this. So I think 10 or 15 is perfect in that space. I'd stick with 10. As far as the smoothness goes, that's a little bit more difficult to describe, but essentially what that means is when I hit that thumb wheel, how quickly does the gimbal respond to that? In other words, the minute I hit it, does it immediately start moving? And when I let go, does it immediately stop? That would be a bad situation because going to 0 on this particular adjustment is exactly that, where when I touch it, it moves. When I let go, it stops. And you'd think that's good, but it's not good for video because we're not digital like that. We're not the Terminator. We're not looking around and bing, bang, we're over here. You want it to be smooth. You want to ramp up slowly. You want to ramp down slowly at the far end. And the best example I can give you is if you've ever been out on a frozen lake and your friend's across the lake and you want to run across the lake really quickly, it's going to take you a couple of seconds to get some traction before you start moving. And then once you get moving, it's going to take you a couple of seconds to slow down at the far end. So you ramp up to speed, you ramp back down to stop, right? And that's exactly what smoothness will do. Now, again, with this one, the lower number is stickier. So the lower you go, if you go to 0, it's immediate response from that gimbal. That's not a good place to be. You want to be somewhere a little bit higher than that. And the number that works for me is 20. I stick at 20. So with the pitch speed, I'm at 10. With the pitch smoothness, I'm at 20. The third adjustment is the gimbal rotation. Now again, I'd mentioned before that the gimbal is normally horizon to down 90 degrees, which gives you plenty of field of view. But why would you not want to look above horizon? There are times when you're looking above a tree and catching that beautiful sun or the clouds above it, or at night you want to catch the moon. If you didn't have the ability to raise the gimbal above horizon, you would have to elevate the quad to see anything, because the best you can see is horizon view. And again, as humans, can you imagine if your neck was locked like this and there was something going on above you? You'd love to be able to look up there, but you can't turn your head back. So by adjusting that to a turn it on, basically, to allow the gimbal to rotate up, it allows you to look up, see the sun, see the moon, the beautiful clouds. And again, as humans, if you couldn't do that, you'd have to rise up on a ladder to look directly at something. It would be very unnatural. So those three settings are super important for any kind of video recording you're doing. So again, just to review, the speed would be 10, smoothness would be 20, and definitely turning that upward gimbal rotation. There's no reason to not have that on. I don't know why they didn't give you the option to turn it off, to be honest with you. The only time you might want to adjust those a little bit differently is if you're taking pictures as opposed to video, because a lot of times you get 30 minutes of flight time out of it. You need to get to a location, take a lot of pictures, and get back. And if you've got those set slow, making the adjustments down to get that perfect shot and framing and everything could take a little longer than you like. So in those cases, you don't really care if it's smooth and you want it to be as fast as possible. So when you're shooting pictures, make the adjustments all the way up for speed and all the way down for smoothness, and that'll give you the quickest response time and the fastest movement of the gimbal, so you can get the shot, get the next shot, get the next shot, and then get back to your home point. But if you're shooting video, go with 10-20 and make sure you turn that upward gimbal rotation. All right, so next I'll show you exactly how to make those adjustments and where they're buried in the menu. To adjust the gimbal settings, start at the main screen of the DJI Fly application. Tap the three dots in the upper right-hand corner, and this will take you to the main settings page. Locate the Control tab and tap that. This will bring up the camera settings page for the aircraft. About halfway down the page, you'll see the word Gimbal, and all the way over to the right, you'll see the Advanced Settings link. It's easy to miss this unless you're looking for it. Tap this to access the Gimbal settings page. On this screen, you'll find the three settings you want to adjust: gimbal speed, gimbal smoothness, and gimbal rotation. The next setting has to do with video caching. Now, what video caching allows you to do is record the video stream you're getting back from the quad on the device that's connected to your controller. Now think about that for a second. Normally, you've got a micro SD card in the drone, and you're recording video directly to that micro SD card, and it allows you to select 1080p or 2.7K resolution. Whatever you see when you hit that record button is being recorded to that SD card. The minute you turn video caching on, that video stream that's being fed back to your controller can be recorded directly to the device you've got connected to that controller. So it's your phone or your tablet. And a couple of things to keep in mind: this resolution could be 1080p or 2.7K. The stream that's being sent back to your controller is only 720p at 30 frames a second. So the video here is not going to be nearly as good a quality as what you're recording on your drone. But the advantage of having it here is that the minute you disconnect your phone, it's right there in the application. So if you're going to share it on a social media site, you have it on your phone already. It's really easy for you to edit it with the application and immediately post it. So I like that. I also like it in the event of something horrible happening to the drone. I still have the footage on my local device. Now, some things to consider here. I turn it on. I think it's a really good thing because it allows me to review the footage pretty quickly without popping out the memory card. But remember that it's going to eat up space on whatever device you've got connected. So when you turn it on, I'll show you how to do that in a minute. When you turn it on, you have a choice of how big that video file can grow. 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig. And the challenge there is if you pick too big a size, it's going to eat up all that space on your phone or your tablet, which means you've got less space for applications and photos and things you normally use the device for. But the good news is if you pick a size, say 4 gig, it eats its own tail, which means it'll record as much as it can of that space you gave it, and then it starts back at the oldest clip and records over it. So it's constantly rotating the latest video through that space that's on that device. So it does take care of itself. It won't grow beyond whatever you set it. But the downside to that is if you're doing a lot of videoing during an afternoon and you only give it 2 gigs of space, you're going to eat that space up in no time. So just keep that in mind. But I like video caching. I think it's a great feature to have, and it's a good way to review the footage without actually going to the drone, pulling the SD card out and seeing how that quality is. You can get a real good idea if you got the shot you need, if the framing was right, if the sun was washing across the screen. So it's a great tool, I guess, or utility to use to review the footage. So that's what video caching is all about. Stay tuned and I'll show you how to get that setting next. To turn on video caching, start at the main screen of the DJI Fly application. Tap the three dots in the upper right-hand corner, and this will take you to the main settings page. Locate the camera tab and tap that. That'll bring you to the main settings page for the camera. On the next page, scroll up so you can see the bottom of the screen and locate the Cache While Recording button. turn this on to start your video caching. Below that, you'll see a choice of how much capacity you want to dedicate to caching those videos. Pick the appropriate capacity for your phone. This last setting affects the return to home height, which is an incredibly important adjustment that you should be checking on a regular basis because it's going to determine how high the quad rises in the air before it spins and starts flying back home to its takeoff point. If somehow an automatic return to home has been triggered by an error condition on the drone, like low batteries or loss of signal, or if you lose sight of the drone in the air for a couple of seconds and you hit the return to home key, you want to make absolutely sure that that height is set well above any obstacles in the field where you're flying, because otherwise, when that condition starts and that drone rises, if you're flying that thing in a field with 80-foot trees and you've set it to 60 feet, it doesn't know there are trees there. It's got no crash avoidance on it, so it's going to fly home thinking it's got open sky, and you're going to hear a pop from the far end of the field and wonder why your drone's not showing up over the top of the trees. I'm laughing a little bit because there are a couple of things you have to keep in mind, and the first one is, which has got me giggling, why would you ever give me control over that number? Why wouldn't you always set it at 400 feet? So I thought a lot about that, and I think the honest answer is because you don't want to set it too high, because if you're flying in areas where you've got high tension wires, or maybe you flew under a bridge to get out there over that beautiful lake, you just don't want the thing rising to 400 feet and flying back because it could hit a bunch of stuff above you. So they give you control over it. My settings are normally 150, 180 feet. I live in New Jersey. There aren't too many trees taller than that, and that's well below most of the obstacles that would be above it. So I think for me, anything under 200 feet is pretty good, so somewhere in that 150 to 200 would be fine. If you're flying in an area where it's wide open, you can set it as high as you want, but the other thing you should bear in mind is you can't set it any higher than what you've set the ceiling in the drone. Now, another adjustment, which I'm not going to cover today, is the maximum height adjustment. Now, in the US, we have a maximum height of 400 feet AGL, which means I can't fly above 400 feet legally. Other countries, you probably can do that, but in the US, 400's it, so I set mine at like 396 or something. My return to home can't go higher than that. So if I did raise that up, just for fun, raise that up to 600 feet, I could raise my return to home, but it's always gated by whatever that maximum height is. But this adjustment, and I can't stress this enough, is so important that when you finish this video today, I want you to go out into the kitchen, put your Mavic Mini on the table, power it up, hook up your controller with your device, and check that rating, because I want to make sure that you've got that set at least 150 feet, no matter where you're flying the thing, because the last thing I want, you're going to ruin a great day of flying by this, is again for you to think it's coming home and wondering where your buddy is, but he's not showing up over the top of the trees because the return to home height was set at 60 feet. Now, one thing you want to be careful of, as I mentioned before, is that a lot of these settings can get reset with a firmware update. So anytime you do a firmware update in your drone, always go back into the settings and check these 5 things to make sure that they're where you want them to be, so the drone's going to fly the way you expect it to. I'd write these down or do a screenshot from the application on your phone so you've always got the settings ready. When you go out in the field, every so often, just check them again to make sure they haven't changed. And that's pretty much it for today. So I covered a lot of stuff. I tried to go through it as quickly as I could. If you've got any questions about anything I've covered, please drop those in the comments below. You guys know how much I love flying, and this Mavic Mini is in my car all the time when I'm out flying in the field. I just can't get enough of this little guy. It's a beautiful quad. If you need accessories for this, I always mention this at the end of the clips. We have the website. We have a ton of accessories for the Mavic Mini. If you want to support the channel, hit the links below. You can go check them out on the site. A lot of cool stuff over there that'll really improve your flying experience. But that's pretty much it for today. If you have any questions about this or anything else you want to talk about with drones or high-tech stuff, drop those in the comments below as well, and I'll do my best to get answers for you and put a clip together if it's really interesting stuff. So thanks an awful lot for watching. I sure hope you guys are getting some flying in with these terrible times that are going on across the globe. But, you know, if you can sneak out in your backyard and get 25 minutes of flying, it's going to bring a little bit of sanity back in your life and a little bit of stress relief. I know it does for me. So thanks an awful lot for watching. Make sure you tune in again. I've got a lot of high-tech clips coming over the next couple of weeks and a couple of drone giveaways as well. So definitely, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, turn the bell on, because if we're giving stuff like this away, you definitely want to get in on it. Anyway, that's pretty much it for today. So thanks for watching, and until next time, happy flying.